My parents never saved a single cent for my college because they believed I wouldn't achieve anything, while my brother got a car and his college tuition fully covered before he even finished high school. I turned 21 on a Tuesday. There was no party cake or candles, just a strange, quiet dinner where my parents exchanged glances as if they were expecting something to explode. I recall that the mashed potatoes were lumpy and cold and the chicken was dry. I sat there pushing food around my plate, wondering if they had a surprise planned. They did not. After dinner, my mother cleared her throat and asked, "Ethan, can you come sit in the living room? We need to talk." My father was already seated in his usual recliner, legs crossed and arms folded. That expression on his face in which he tries to appear serious but ends up looking like he's trying too hard was already setting off alarms in my head. I sat across from them, hoping for a brief moment that they would express their pride. Maybe even something cheesy like, "You're a man now." I've been working part-time at a local hardware store since I was 19 to keep my grades up, and I even got into a state university on partial scholarship. I didn't expect fireworks, but I also didn't anticipate what happened next. "We just wanted to be honest with you," my mother began. Her voice was calm and rehearsed. "We never really saved anything for your college." I blinked, trying to process. Before I could react, my father jumped in as if he couldn't take it anymore. "It's not that we didn't want to," he admitted, leaning forward. "It's just, well, we honestly didn't think you'd actually go or amount to much." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so jarring. I thought maybe they were joking, but they weren't. My mom just gave me this tired, almost pitying smile. "You were always kind of unfocused, not like your brother." And there it was, my younger brother Jacob. Golden boy. Honor roll private soccer lessons since age 9. I love him. I really do. But he's always been their favorite. When he turned 19, they threw him a surprise party with a shiny new car parked out front. He got a college fund. I got a pair of socks and a keychain that said, "Go get him." I shrugged it off at the time, thinking they were waiting to help me when I actually got in somewhere. I figured they were just being cautious. Turns out they'd written me off years ago. I didn't yell or cry. I just sat there nodding slowly, pretending it didn't hurt like hell. "Okay," I said. "Thanks for telling me." I went back to my room, shut the door, and stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. That night, I started applying for every scholarship and part-time job I could find, including weekend shifts at a local diner, odd jobs on campus bulletin boards, and even tutoring younger kids for money. I was determined to go to college even if it meant crawling there. That was 8 months ago, and now I'm in my second semester, working 2 jobs, barely sleeping, and sometimes skipping meals just to make ends meet. But every few weeks, I get a text from my mother saying something like, "You've been really distant lately, is everything okay?" Or worse, she'll send one of those guilt-inducing messages like, "We're still your family, Ethan. You can't ignore us forever." As if I owe them closeness, after what they did, as if I'm the one pulling away for no reason. What really drives the knife deeper is how they keep bragging about Jacob's potential as if it's a group project in which they're all invested. He's not even sure if he wants to go to college. They gave him everything and he's still trying to find himself. Meanwhile, I'm working 10-hour shifts and passing exams with barely enough energy to keep my eyes open. Last week, I went home for the first time in months, mostly because Jacob begged me to, and he doesn't know the whole story, just that things have been strange between me and our parents. When I walked into the living room, I saw my mother showing someone a photo of Jacob holding up his acceptance letter, grinning like he had just won the lottery. She looked so proud, and I stood there in the doorway, invisible. She turned and hugged me quickly, then said, "You look tired, Ethan. Maybe if you let us help, you won't have to run yourself to the ground." "Help? Do they now want to help?" I said. "Nothing." Just smiled and nodded. But something changed in me that night. I realized they'd never see me as anything other than the backup plan, the afterthought, the kid who somehow failed to fail. And maybe that's what bothers them the most, that I didn't crumble when they let me down, that I didn't become the disappointment they were so sure I'd be. What they don't know is that I've been keeping track of everything. The money they put into Jacob's dreams, the way they spoke about me when they thought I wasn't listening, the backhanded compliments, the subtle digs, the complete lack of support. I've been biting my tongue, and if they think I'm distant now, they haven't seen anything yet. I couldn't stop thinking about how my mom looked at me when she said I looked tired, not concerned, not sympathetic, just vaguely judgmental, as if I'd brought it on myself. Maybe struggling to put myself through school, working night shifts at the diner, and early morning stocking shelves was proof that I wasn't. That week back on campus, I pulled 4 doubles in a row, slept on the floor of my tiny apartment between shifts, and still managed to turn in a 10-page essay on time. Then, on Friday, I got a call from my father, who never calls, and I let it go to voicemail. I had just finished a graveyard shift and was walking home in the early dawn, my feet aching and my shirt clinging to me with the scent of burnt eggs and coffee. I listened to the voicemail while walking under gray skies, half zoning out. "Hey, Ethan. Listen, we were wondering if you'd be available next weekend. It's Jacob's big showcase for his photography class. You know, the one where his work is featured in the school lobby? We'd love to see you there. The whole family is going. Your mom has even ordered catering. Just let us know." "Okay." I stopped walking, catering for a high school photography exhibit. And suddenly I was 19 again, standing in the rain outside my school's debate final, waiting for anyone to show up and cheer me on. They never did. They said they had errands, that it wasn't a big deal. And yet here they were, now pulling out the red carpet for Jacob's artsy photo collage. I didn't call back. I didn't even text. When the weekend came, I picked up an extra shift at the diner. During my break, I scrolled through my mom's Facebook and saw her latest post. A dozen photos of Jacob standing next to his photos, framed and lit up. The caption read, "So proud of our baby boy and his incredible talent. He smiles with mom and dad, poses with his friends, and laughs. The future is bright and will always be your biggest fans." I kept scrolling until I came across another post from earlier that week. A photo of me taken without my permission while working at the diner. Someone had tagged me in the background, blurry and hunched over a counter, and my mother had commented, "Our other son is working hard. He's always been such a trooper." There was no context, no pride, just pity. Around this time, the requests began to come in, but not for me. "Hey, Ethan," my mother texted one afternoon. "Jacob's thinking about applying to the same university as you. Would you be willing to help him with his application? Just some editing and feedback. The same university, the one I fought my way into, the one I could only attend because I practically sold pieces of my soul to every scholarship committee willing to listen." The idea of him simply walking in because he liked the vibe felt like someone had dumped boiling water down my back. I waited a full day to respond, then wrote, "Sorry, I'm swamped with work and exams. Maybe he can ask one of his teachers." There was no response. A week later, my father called again, and this time I answered mostly out of curiosity. I was standing outside the grocery store with a bag of discounted instant noodles. "Hey, Ethan," he said casually. "Quick question. Do you still have the old laptop?" "Yes," I said slowly. "Why?" "Well, Jacob's just broke, and we figured if you don't need it anymore, he could use it. He's starting to apply to colleges now, and it would be extremely helpful." I blinked. "You mean the laptop I still use for school? Which one am I currently writing papers on?" There was a pause. "Oh, I just assumed you'd upgraded by now." I laughed dryly and bitterly. "No, Dad, I have it because I can't afford to." He didn't apologize, just kind of chuckled awkwardly and said, "Well, maybe let us know when you do." All right. That's when it dawned on me. They weren't just favoring Jacob. They saw me as an accessory, a spare tire to be used when convenient and stored away when not. It wasn't about love or fairness. It was about expectation. Jacob deserved things, and I was supposed to earn scraps and be grateful for them. A few days later, I got sick. Not just a little flu, but really sick. I had a fever, a sore throat, a full body ache, and it felt like my organs were melting. I had to call out of work, which meant I missed rent by about $50. I texted my mother not to ask for help, but out of desperation to feel human. "I've been sick. I haven't slept. Can't work." She replied 3 hours later, "I hope you feel better soon. Drink tea. Maybe Jacob can drop off some soup if he has time." He didn't. And when I finally got out of bed 3 days later to check my mailbox, there was a card in it. One of those cheap dollar store greeting cards with a puppy on the front. Inside was a $15 bill and a sticky note that said, "You've always been a fighter. We believe in you. Love Mom and Dad. I stared at it for a long time. $15. Meanwhile, I knew Jacob was about to get a new camera, which Dad had mentioned on Facebook. I stopped responding to texts because I realized I would never be enough for them. Not even close. And the more I tried to earn their love, the more pathetic I looked in their eyes. That was the tipping point. Not a scream or a blow-up, but a quiet, stinging realization. I declined calls, and then came the moment that turned my frustration into rage. 3 weeks later, I was on my way to work when I ran into Jacob on campus. He looked surprised but happy. "Hey man, I didn't know you had class in this building." I told him I was on my way to work and he frowned. "Still doing that diner thing?" "I'm still paying my own way," I explained. He laughed as if it were a joke, and then he said something I'll never forget. "You know, Mom and Dad were going to help you with your tuition at one point, but they thought it would make you complacent, like you'd give up trying." I froze. "Yeah?" He continued, oblivious. "They said you needed to struggle a little to stay motivated. Like if they handed you money, you'd just waste it." I stared at him, my own brother parroting back the logic that justified my suffering. He shrugged. "Anyway, I have to run. I have a meeting with the student gallery director. They're thinking about giving me my own wall this spring." I remained motionless, staring after him as he walked away. The world didn't blur or shake. It just hollowed out. That was when I decided I was done playing along, done pretending the distance was unintentional, done giving them any part of me that they hadn't already discarded. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long stretch. I didn't go to work that day. Instead, I walked past the diner, the student center, and everything else until I found a quiet spot behind the library and sat down on the cold concrete. I don't know how long I sat there, an hour or two, staring at the cracks in the sidewalk, watching ants crawl around like they had somewhere to be. I kept thinking about Jacob's words. They thought that if they helped me, I'd stop trying, that I'd become lazy, that I didn't deserve help. I'd been breaking my back for 2 years straight, working myself to the ground while they watched from a distance and congratulated themselves on how my suffering was noble, necessary, and character building. I felt rage, yes, but beneath it was something deeper, something I hadn't admitted to myself until that moment. Shame. Not because I'd failed, but because I'd spent so long chasing scraps from people who never saw me as worth feeding in the first place. And now, the worst part, I felt hollow. That night, I went home to my apartment and stared at the bills on the kitchen counter. Rent was 7 days overdue. Electricity was due in 3 days. My phone had a 5% battery and I couldn't find my charger. I hadn't eaten anything but a gas station granola bar since yesterday morning and I was exhausted. I lay down on the floor because my bed was covered in clean laundry that I hadn't folded, pulled a hoodie over my face to block out the light from the hallway, and just stopped for 3 days. I didn't go to work. I missed class. I let my phone die. I didn't eat and I didn't shower. I just lay there feeling like a ghost inside my own skin. And when I finally got up, when my stomach hurt so bad from hunger that I couldn't ignore it any longer, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My face was pale, my eyes sunken, and the bags under my eyes were so dark they looked like bruises. Still, I reached for my backpack, grabbed my laptop, and walked to the campus library. The only thing they hadn't taken from me was my mind. I began slowly with one email, one scholarship, and one line on a resume. I applied for a campus tutoring job, then another part-time job at the computer lab, and went to the financial aid office to ask questions I should have asked a year ago. I ate ramen for a week straight and drank water from the library fountains. I discovered emergency grants that I had no idea existed, sold a few old books online, and even posted my notes from last semester's chemistry class on a study help site, and started making $15 here and there as people downloaded them. I used to sleep with my coat on because I couldn't afford to turn on the heat, but I kept going. I started getting up early, not because I had energy, but because I needed time to work before classes. I'd work shifts at the computer lab from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., then sprint to class. In the afternoons, I tutored high school students via Zoom using the library study pods for privacy. I even started helping a freshman with math in exchange for meals. He had a generous meal plan and didn't mind sharing if I helped him pass calculus. And slowly, so slowly, I started to breathe again. There was this moment about a month later that I still remember. It was 7:45 a.m., and I was sitting at the computer lab desk eating a banana from the tutoring center's free snack table. The sun was pouring through the windows, lighting up the dust in the air, and for the first time in forever, I didn't feel like a failure. I didn't feel like someone chasing approval or trying to win affection. I felt capable. I'd done this despite them, not because of them. And then the universe threw me a bone. I got accepted into a research fellowship program that paid a monthly stipend and provided me with lab experience. I applied on a whim weeks earlier thinking I'd never get it, but I did, and the email came with the subject line, "Congratulations, Ethan." I sat there and read it 5 times before I let myself believe it. 4 days later, I was able to pay rent on time for the first time in months. I bought a space heater, restocked my fridge with actual food, and even replaced my frayed backpack with one I found on sale. Then, in an impulsive act of self-care, I bought a cheap journal and began writing again, something I hadn't done since I was 17. It wasn't all sunshine after that. Jacob posted a video of his college decision reveal, and there they were again, Mom and Dad clapping, crying, and hugging him as he opened his acceptance letter. They bought him balloons, took him to dinner, and made a slideshow about his accomplishments. I still had moments when I was bitter, and seeing family photos online hurt like a wound I kept scratching. The caption said, "One down, one to go," as if I were just background noise, but something inside me had changed. They didn't break me. They tried. Whether they meant to or not, they loaded me down with doubt-tied bricks to my legs and tossed me in the deep end. But I swam. I clawed my way back to the surface, breathless and shaking, but alive. And one night, sitting at my desk with a cup of actual tea in hand and the heat humming quietly in the corner, I realized something strange. I no longer cared if they ever said, "We're proud of you," because I was proud of myself. I didn't need their words. I didn't need their guilt-tripped apologies, backhanded praise, or thinly veiled pity. I had built something out of ashes, found my footing in a storm, and now I was watching, waiting, not for them to change, but for the moment they'd need something from me, which I knew would come, and when it did, I'd be ready. By the time spring rolled around, I had a routine that worked. I was still working long hours, but the research fellowship provided me with enough stability to stop worrying about the next rent deadline. I had groceries in the fridge, a desk that no longer wobbled, and my own copy of the campus gym pass, which I had won in a scholarship raffle. But I wasn't exhausted. I was driven, focused, and something else had started to grow alongside that drive: clarity. It started with a single question, the kind that buzzes in the back of your mind when things go quiet. What would they do if the roles were reversed? I thought about that more than I'd admit. What would they do if I were the golden child and Jacob was scraping by? Would they have let him struggle like they let me? Would they have made him fight for every? The answer wasn't hard to guess. They never expected me to win or even compete. And now that I was doing better than ever, there was a strange tension in the air whenever we talked, because we still talked on occasion out of obligation more than anything else. My mother would send me little check-in texts. My father would send me boring news articles he thought were relevant to my major, and Jacob would send me selfies from campus. But none of them ever asked me real questions. They assumed I was still floundering, juggling plates with shaky hands, so I let them think that. At first, it was just easier that way, but it gradually became strategic. I stopped posting on social media. I let my profile go dormant. And when I received new accomplishments, another grant, a published research paper, or a faculty recommendation, I didn't say anything, especially not to Jacob. Because around this time, Jacob began applying to my university, the same department, the same program, and I knew that the opportunity would come sooner than I expected. One afternoon, I was in the tutoring center when I overheard 2 faculty assistants discussing spring admissions. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I just recognized the name they mentioned, Jacob Monroe, and I froze. I leaned in closer, pretending to organize folders on the nearby shelf. "His portfolio is strong, but the writing sample, yikes." "Yeah," the other laughed. "The photography is decent, but the essay was all over the place. A little entitled, if I'm being honest." They moved on to another applicant, but my ears were burning. That night, curiosity got the best of me. I logged into the student portal where peer review opportunities were occasionally listed and searched for Jacob's name. I didn't find his application, but I did find a research assistant listing. He had applied for the same one I'd been offered weeks earlier, but turned down due to scheduling conflicts. And here's where it gets wild. He used my name as a reference. I was dropped in as someone who could vouch for his academic work, which I had never seen and knew was shaky at best because we discussed it last Thanksgiving. He complained about hating lab reports and not receiving any of the material. There was no prior notice text or email. I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I contacted Professor Owens, the one in charge of the RA program, and casually asked him if I could take the position after all. My tutoring schedule had lightened. I told him, and he was delighted to offer it back to me. That was step one. Step two was a little more satisfying. About a week later, Jacob texted me unexpectedly. "Hey man, I just applied for the Owens RA position. I used you as a reference. I hope that's okay." I waited 3 hours before responding. "I just saw it. I hope you are ready for it. It's a lot of work." He immediately responded, "Haha, yeah, but the profs love me. It shouldn't be hard." I didn't respond after that because while he was flexing, I was planning a meeting with Professor Owens in which I would quietly and professionally mention that while I supported my brother's ambitions, I couldn't in good conscience recommend him for a research-heavy position after he admitted to struggling with the materials. I didn't trash him. I simply told the truth. Owens nodded thoughtfully. That tracks his writing sample wasn't great. Then, as if rewarding my candor, he added, "Glad you're on board again." Later that week, Jacob called me frustrated. "Did you talk with Professor Owens?" He emailed me this super vague rejection and said I didn't seem like the right fit. I kept my voice steady. "Yeah, he inquired about your work ethic and background. I told him what I knew." Silence. "You really used me as a reference without asking. What did you think would happen?" He did not yell. Jacob wasn't yelling, but I could feel the tension crackling through the phone like static. "You could have helped me." "No," I said calmly. "I could have lied for you. That's different." He hung up. I expected a reaction from my parents, but it never came, which meant one of two things. He hadn't told them, or he did, and they chose not to get involved. In any case, I kept going. Around this time, I started working on something bigger, something more permanent. I'd been working on a side project for months, a digital tutoring platform for underfunded schools in rural areas which began as a class assignment but had grown into something real. With the help of a friend from the business department, we built a prototype, applied for funding, were approved, and won a pitch competition. By May, we had a small grant, 2 interns, and a partnership offer from a nonprofit I'd admired for years. And my name was attached to all of it, not buried in the footnotes, not hidden behind someone else's glow mine. But I still hadn't said anything to my family, and I watched from the sidelines as they poured more money into Jacob's college prep, new laptop, new dorm furniture, and even a weekend retreat to clear his head before finals. Meanwhile, I paid off the last of my rent and bought a second-hand suit for professional meetings. I wasn't flashy, and I didn't post about it. I didn't need to because this wasn't about proving myself anymore. It was about allowing them to underestimate me just long enough. Then the perfect opportunity presented itself, and I couldn't have scripted it better. Jacob got into my university, and they were overjoyed. My mother called and left a voicemail. My father sent a group text about the boys being reunited, and Jacob even texted me directly, acting as if we were on good terms again. "Looks like I'll be crashing your turf soon. Maybe you can show me the ropes." I stared at that message for a long time because he had no idea what he was getting into. The first day of orientation was approaching, and I had already volunteered to help run the student panels that week. I had access to the speaker list, the student guides, the welcoming packets, and I knew everything about who was coming, what they'd be doing, and how to steer things in interesting directions. And I was ready to use it not out of pettiness, but out of precision. Because if they were going to spend years pretending I was invisible, I was going to show them what invisible really looks like. Orientation week arrived with all the chaotic energy of a theme park on opening day. New students wandering campus with wide eyes, parents hauling suitcases, and campus guides barking directions with barely concealed exhaustion. I'd volunteered to be a member of the Student Success Panel, a carefully curated group of upperclassmen meant to inspire and reassure freshmen and their families. We were asked to share our stories, how we overcame obstacles, found community, and succeeded academically. It was supposed to be wholesome and uplifting, but I turned it into something entirely different. My moment. The event took place in the university's main auditorium, which was packed with incoming students and their parents. I recognized Jacob's voice before I saw him shouting something about parking to my mom. Sure enough, there they were. Jacob in his designer sneakers, Mom in a bright floral cardigan, and Dad scanning the crowd like he owned the place. They didn't see me on stage until I stood to speak. I was the final student on the panel, and the moderator handed me the mic with a smile. Ethan, you are one of our research fellows and scholarship recipients. Why don't you tell everyone how you arrived here? I took a breath, steadying my heartbeat. Of course, I'd love to. I told the truth. Not the clean, curated version, the real one. I wasn't supposed to make it here, I said, pacing slowly across the stage. Not because I wasn't capable, but because I didn't have the support most students take for granted. I watched as some parents glanced at each other. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. My younger brother, who's here today, actually got a full ride from our parents. They bought him a car at 19, gave him a college fund, and celebrated every win, big or small. I got a lecture on how they didn't think I'd ever amount to much. Gasps and chuckles of surprise. I worked 2 jobs to get here. I lived on instant noodles and barely slept to keep up my grades, not because I was special, but because I had no other choice. However, I paused, locking eyes with Jacob in the 4th row. Pressure can either break or sharpen you. I chose to become sharper. The moderator tried to gently nudge me back to a lighter tone, but I waved her off with a smile. Sorry, this is important. There are students in this audience who believe they do not belong here and have been told that they will never be enough. I'm here to tell you that they're wrong. You do belong. You can thrive, and you don't need anyone's permission to prove it. The applause was awkward at first, then it grew. My professors applauded. The faculty coordinator nodded. Even the moderator had to admit how powerful it was. My parents sat stone-faced, completely surprised. Jacob stared at the floor, and that was just the beginning. After the panel, parents and students interacted with the speakers. A few kids approached to shake my hand. One mother hugged me and whispered, "My son needed to hear that." Meanwhile, Jacob vanished behind the auditorium, most likely hoping to avoid the consequences. But I wasn't finished yet. I had one final card to play. That afternoon, a reception was held for the families of students who received academic honors or leadership positions. It was an invitation-only event, and while Jacob was not invited, I was. And this year, I wasn't there alone. See, I had sent 2 of my own invitations. One went to my favorite professor, who has mentored me since my 2nd semester and treated me as an equal. The other went to Mr. Baines, my high school guidance counselor, who once told me I wasn't competitive enough for college. He appeared stunned, impressed, and graying at the temples. "Ethan," he replied, shaking my hand, "I can't believe this. You appear successful." "I am," I stated unequivocally, "and I remember everything you said to me, by the way." He laughed nervously, but I simply smiled and walked away. My parents arrived late. I could tell by their expressions that they were not expecting the red carpet. They expected a casual meet and greet rather than a catered event complete with media booths, donors, and a slideshow highlighting student achievements. And on that slideshow, on the largest screen in the room, was a slide that said, "Ethan Monroe Research Fellow Co-Founder Equity Tutor funded by the Blake Foundation Academic Excellence Award, invited speaker student leadership panel." First, my mother's mouth fell open as the slide cycled past. My father blinked slowly as if trying to reboot his brain. They had no idea who I had become. And just when I thought I'd had enough, fate gave me another gift. A local journalist covering orientation week wanted to interview me for a short feature on student resilience. I agreed. The article went live 3 days later. It began with my quotation. "My parents told me they never saved for college because they didn't think I'd attend. That moment broke something in me, but it also started a fire." The piece went viral on campus, and by the end of the week I had received a message from Jacob. "You embarrassed the whole family. You didn't have to drag us through the mud like that," I replied. "I didn't name names. If they recognize themselves in my story, that's up to them." He left me on red. My mother tried to call me a few days later. I let it ring. Then another message came in. "We're sorry if we ever made you feel lesser. That was never our intention." I didn't reply. I had nothing else to say because I didn't do any of this for vengeance. Not really. That was all the motivation I needed to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. The real victory was becoming someone I could be proud of. A year later, I graduated with honors. I received a job offer from a technology education nonprofit. We moved into a small apartment with hardwood floors and a view of the city. And when I sent out graduation announcements, I included a photo of myself standing in front of the auditorium wearing the same suit I wore on the day of the panel. There's no note or card, just the photo. My parents did not respond, but I knew they saw it, which was enough. I built my future from the ground up with no safety nets, cheering sections, or shortcuts. And now, every time I walk into a boardroom or speak with a struggling student, I remember that experience not as a scar, but as proof that I was never the disappointment. They couldn't see beyond their own expectations.